So thanks for joining us. We're going to get started right away. Got a bunch of folks on already. I'm excited. I'm excited to share Damion and his wisdom with you guys. Damion and I have been friends for, oh man, most of the last decade, probably 5, 6, 7 years. Speaking at some of the same events, getting around the same circles. And one of the things, Damion, you probably don't know this, but we've never had an IRA, self-directed IRA, 401k, eQRP, any of those guys on our platforms before. And one of the reasons is I've got some of our assets have heavy depreciation components built around them. So I've always kind of taught from that angle, and I've let our investors who have self-directed IRAs come in with their self-directed IRA money and invest in our vehicles, which works great, it's fine. And we've dealt with a ton of, not a ton, we've dealt with a handful of different self-directed IRA companies over the last decade. And I was always just like, hey, the investor brings their IRA company of choice and it wants to invest in some of our products, great. And we've worked with all of them. One of the things, and this is one of the reasons that I felt it was necessary to have you come on, is the issue that came up just in the last couple of weeks, where self-directed IRAs were kind of in the limelight, and they were really on the chopping block when it had to do with the infrastructure bill and allowing self-directed IRAs to invest in private placements. As I know many folks do, it ended up getting dropped out of that infrastructure bill and never happening. But it showed me that it's on the radar and politicians are looking at it. Okay, that's like a red flag, right? The other thing, and this is something that we've dealt with a lot over the last couple of years, and that is the misconception about self-directed IRAs, especially Roths, thinking that, you know, if I've got my money in a Roth, I never get taxed, period. Not quite true, not so fast. But a lot of people's misconception about that. And I just figured, you know what, why not have the professional come in and talk about UBIT tax? You know, I know some IRAs and some of those vehicles have UBIT tax. I know you've got your own thoughts about how to not pay UBIT tax. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And, you know, I thought this was a good time to really talk about, especially those two things, because it has to do with protecting our investors. And I want to make sure everybody gets an understanding about that. And so welcome. And I'm excited to have you on and hear what you have to share. It's all yours.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Dave. It's good to have everybody. I appreciate the invitation and looking forward to seeing you in Florida soon. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Too.
Yeah. I think what I'll do is I've got a presentation that goes through the UBIT, it goes through the new changes, and it goes through everything. And then y'all have a chance to ask questions or whatever you want to do. But this will make sure that we cover all these things, and it'll give insights and case studies and tax consequences. So you really will have an education over the next about 30, 35 minutes. So let me share my screen and we'll start. You want to enable me to share screen here? So one of the things that you guys are going to have a chance to do, some of you already have this, is get a copy of the book, the QRP book. We have a brand new edition that just came out literally last week. And so that's at the printer right now. So you guys will be able to get a chance at getting a copy of that. Dave alluded to something, and that was the Build Back Better program. And there's some legislation that Congress is messing around with because of this guy. I think this is one of the triggers that caused some of the targeting on IRAs. This is Peter Thiel. He's one of the co-founders of PayPal with Elon Musk. And he's also the guy that ended up with the $5 billion Roth IRA, which seriously pissed off Congress, because they said, why is a billionaire why does he have $5 billion in a Roth IRA? That's not what they were there for. And so the better question, I think, is how do you turn 2000, which is what he had in the late 90s, 1999, into $5 billion? And so I want to give you some ideas about how to do that. Some of the stuff you're already doing with the real asset investor and with Dave, but it's really it's a shift from 2x to 100x. So when you find ways to really expand your opportunities, he went into early stage companies and had penny shares, penny stocks, and a few years later they went public. He did that over and over again, and so that 2000 turned into 5 billion over 21 years, 22 years. That's great, except here's the problem: IRS went, or the Congress said, we don't like that, and so they started attacking it. Meanwhile, somebody violated the IRA rules, and the court, the IRS, came after him, and on November 18th, checkbook IRAs became illegal. So like there's this attack by Congress, there's an attack by the U.S. tax court. I'll go into this case in a few minutes and tell you guys what that actually means and how to deal with it. But what's happening is there is an attack on IRAs. And so I'm going to give you some alternatives and what you can do instead, because a lot of people think that they're supposed to, or that's the only option they have, and it's not true. One of the things that I think is important is for you guys to know a little bit maybe about me, so you know who's talking, and that would help if my screen went to the right slide. All right, there it is. Mastery is something that I've seen in Dave over all the years that we've known each other. I watched him go from really the beginning stages to a place where he's at the top of the field and really playing at a place of mastery. And that's important for anything you guys are doing, if it's investing, if it's professionally, because you're going to end up being in a space where you actually see everything, you understand it, and it doesn't happen accidentally. It happens because you spent 10,000 hours or more. And I say that because that's what Malcolm Gladwell said, and I think it's true. I've done that with a few things. One of them is martial arts. I spent probably 20,000 hours studying martial arts. In the background, you can see some of my black belts, and there's not that many things we have that we can actually spend 10,000 hours with, because if you think about it, 40 hours a week is 2,000 hours. That's 5 straight years. So it's pretty special when you find people that have spent 10,000 hours dedicating themselves to something, which is what Dave has done, which is why everything that he's involved with is so great, because he's actually got that mastery. In terms of real estate and investing background, this was my situation, what my life looked like. It's actually who I was in 2005, 2006. It looks pretty impressive for most people. May or may not be impressive to you. I thought I was pretty impressive with myself, getting a Ferrari that Will Smith drove. And that was cool until 2008, when everything blew up. Like my life blew up, lost $25 million. And on the other side of that, I had to shift into a place with a deeper why. And one of the things that I like is hanging out with guys like Dave, because they are focused on giving you guys better options and better tools. It's external. Dave's not trying to figure out how to make more money for himself. He's figuring out how to make you guys more money. And as a side effect, he gets wealthier. And that's what Zig Ziglar said years ago. If you want to help enough, you can have anything you want in your life if you help enough people get what they want. So my deeper why is to have 1 million people that are unshackled. I see money as modern day slavery. And if we can unshackle it, then you guys can truly be free. But we've got to unshackle things. And there's 2 people that we've got to deal with and fight through, or past, or beat. And that's this guy, which you guys probably recognize. This is Jerome Powell. And he wants to keep printing. And even though there's this idea that the Federal Reserve is going to slow that down, or they're going to raise rates, and that's possible, they still printed 40% of the money in the last 18 months that exists. So they're just printing and printing, which is why inflation is going crazy. And the other one is this cat, call her AOC. And she has this idea that there's never enough tax. And one of the things that's happening is you're getting better information from Dave and from the opportunities to reduce the taxes. But Congress is constantly going after things, trying to figure out how to bring those tax dollars back in, because they don't like rich people getting rich, or unless it's their friends. And I recently had an experience spending a bunch of time in DC, seeing how this works. And it was pretty disgusting seeing the inside. I watched how everything was pay to play. It was all about money. It was all about donors. And so understanding that, I can see how it's working in a different way. This is how much money that most people spend or lose every year when you make $1.70 of it goes to different government tax. And so that's a problem. The alternative is zero. And I'm going to show you how to go to zero. And it's like one of the things that Peter Thiel did was develop a ginormous Roth. And I'm going to show you why that can be one of the greatest tools, if not the greatest long-term tool that you'll ever use. And it's just one of the tools, because there's lots of different tax strategies and all the stuff that I learned from Dave whenever he's talking about these different things, whether it's it's carbon credits or it's the ATMs, it's all these different things. And it's taking the time to figure out how to use the tax code and how to deliver something of value. And it's The idea is to get your taxes down to zero so you can use your money and not have somebody else taking it and using it for bombs and entitlement programs. What we're going to specifically talk about is something that many of you already know about, but most of the population doesn't. It's the eQRP. And this is really the Ferrari of 401ks. It's the enhanced qualified retirement plan. There's over $1 billion in eQRPs right now. So to me, that sounds impressive until you realize that there's like $40 trillion sitting in retirement accounts. So this isn't even a pimple on a rhinoceros's butt. Like this is just it's a flick of sand, but it's significant for the people that have it because they control their money. And the reason you guys haven't heard of it, if you haven't, is because of two people. This guy on the left, if he's on your left, they're both gray. So I don't know how I distinguish them. You all probably recognize Bernie Madoff, the one with the tie that you can see. And he was the guy that died recently in jail after swindling 60 billion. Jamie Dimon has swindled who knows how many billions. And I look at them both the same way. These two guys have the same philosophy: take as much as they can from people and then put it in their own pockets. Chase, which is what Jamie leads, recently got fined in 2020 $1 billion for manipulating the silver market over a 10-year period. That's how much they made in 2020 on their silver desk. So for them, cheating and stealing is just a cost of business when they get fined or penalized. So when you think about that, you have to think, okay, how can I do better and go around these guys? Because these guys are meant to take your money and control it. And so we want to make sure you have control of it and you can do something different. I always like to bring this up because it's really the Wall Street wolves that are out to eat you. And we're going to circumvent them, go around them. This is about giving you guys control. And that's one of the things that I like when you look at the real asset investor, it's about real control. And that's key. If it's kind of like buying gold and silver, if you don't physically hold it, you don't own it. If it's a paper product, that's a derivative, that's a manipulation that can be screwed over by the traders, by banks. So we want to talk about control. How do you get control? Typical retirement accounts do not give you control. They give you paper representations that are derivatives of some other thing, and they can be definitely manipulated. I'm going to show you how to put all that stuff in your hands. So the eQRP is a retirement checkbook. It's a legally allowed checkbook for your retirement money. It allows you to do deals quickly when you want to do them. It's got lawsuit protections, which IRAs and solo 401ks do not have the same protections. We're going to talk about UBIT tax in a minute. UBIT tax is the tax that is killing people even in Roth IRAs. And Dave alluded to that people didn't realize they could be taxed in a Roth IRA and they're getting hammered. I mean, we're seeing people showing up saying, I just got a $200,000 tax bill for my Roth IRA. I didn't know this was coming. And it's because nobody told them and it's not really publicly discussed. So we're going to talk about how you do this for you, for your kids, your employees, if you have any, and really how this works. The options that you have are real estate of all different types. You can do things in the US, you can do things globally, Belize, Europe, really anywhere you wanted. Physical gold and silver are allowed. Those are not allowed to be owned and held by you in an IRA. So there's some pretty big differences we're going to get into. Bitcoin and NFTs, things in the crypto space. I know Dave's really interested in this too, just what's going on in crypto. And for all of you that maybe don't know much about crypto, it's a place that you should learn because it is happening and it's going to transform our system. You can use your retirement accounts to invest in these things and take possession of them if you use the right one. Things like self-storage, really anything you can think of. There's only a few things you can't do, so it's wide open. Let's talk specifically about the self-directed IRA space and compare it, because a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between the eQRP and self-directed IRAs? IRAs are slow because there's a custodian. You always have to deal with somebody else giving you permission. eQRP is fast. You're in charge. You've got the checkbook. You're the trustee. There's an IRA tax or a UBIT tax with an IRA, which means leveraged real estate is going to be killed by tax. I'll give you some examples. eQRP is exempt. That means you can have all the leverage you want. You can invest in syndications and you can grow that money tax-free, take it out tax-free, and there's never going to be UBIT tax. IRAs, you can only put $6,000 in if you're contributing. eQRPs, it's actually $61,000. That just changed. So it's 10 times more. So really over 20 years, IRAs aren't going to get you rich. They're just going to get you old. Here's a syndication example from a friend of ours that is out in Texas. And it was a $50 million build. It's a hospital out there. It took about $10 million in cash. So $40 million in debt. And 5 years later, sold for $70 million. So going from 50 to 70, everybody's happy, except the IRA investors that invested, because their money doubled. But because it was 80% leveraged, 80% of their profits were subject to UBIT. So these people got a surprise bill from their accountants basically saying you owe $25,000. And that's not a good thing when you're thinking you just doubled your money and then you just lost a quarter of it. This is because of UBIT. UBIT's this unrelated business income tax, and it's triggered by unrelated debt financed income. So basically, if you've got leveraged real estate inside of an IRA, this tax gets triggered. It's a 37% tax. It's one of the biggest taxes in the tax code. IRAs are going to pay $25,000 on average in a deal like this if they had a $100,000 profit. eQRPs are exempt, so they pay zero. It's a major difference. It's literally the only difference. It's the same money. It's the same retirement, system, but it's a different part of the tax code. So it's a choice. When people pay taxes, that's optional. Like it's really funny when people go, I hate my taxes. I got to pay taxes. And I always laugh and I'm like, well, why are you doing that? And you apparently haven't talked to Dave, because Dave would tell you, here's some options and you can not pay taxes. And that's really the option here with retirement accounts if you use the correct one. eQRPs are exempt from UDFI. It's written right into the code. So here's another example. We had a client that came out after I was speaking at a friend of ours that just passed away at Gene Garino's event in Phoenix a few years ago. And she came out and he does the residential assisted living. And so they wanted to do some residential assisted living, but they just flipped a house. They bought the thing, they flipped it, and they were literally closing the following week, like Friday of the following week. But they bought it with their IRA. When they came out to me, they said, we have a problem. And I said, yeah, what is it? And they told me the deal. And I said, you invested with your IRA? And they said, yeah. So their net profit of 68,000, they had almost all leverage. It was hard money, private money that they borrowed. So it was like a few thousand from their IRA. And I said, well, okay, so do you want to fix this? Because they're like, yeah, because it's a $20,000 tax bill. So what we did is we said, all right, we're gonna change this. We're gonna convert it from an IRA to an eQRP. We did it that week. And when they closed on it, it was sold from the eQRP. They got to keep the $68,000. So it took them about 15 minutes to go through this process of the application and building things and transferring their asset over. And because of that 15 minutes, they saved $20,000. That is way better than Geico's 15%. So 15 minutes can definitely be a big deal. And they get to use the 20,000 to invest again. So that's all these chunks that we're going to go over. They're $20,000 chunks. These matter and they compound. And it's like Peter Thiel's deal. He hasn't paid taxes on any of his stuff. It just keeps growing and compounding. If he was paying 25% taxes, it would not be $5 billion. It might, I don't even know if it'd be $1 billion at this point. So if you do have an asset that's in an IRA, there's a way to move it over. It's called an in-kind rollover. It's what we did with Mara. You basically take the asset and we transfer it. We just push it from the IRA right into the eQRP. Once that happens, as long as it happens before you sell the asset or before the syndication is closed, there's no UBIT. The UBIT is triggered at the day when the asset sells. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. They say, well, I've had my IRA in a syndication for years and nothing's happened. That's because the asset hasn't sold yet. And so Dave and I were talking, we've talked with Tom Wheelwright, the accountant, over the years. And one of the things that Tom will say, if you ever hear him, he's like, why would you ever use an IRA for real estate? And I'm like, I don't know. That's a good question. You wouldn't, because of UBIT. And so what happens is at the exit, there's this event. During the whole process, there's not the event. So at the end of a syndication, you've got recapture of taxes, you've got UBIT, all these things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to avoid recapture. We're going to avoid UBIT. And we're going to do that because of the eQRP structure. Let's talk about this. This is a major deal because a lot of you guys and gals have checkbook IRAs. There was a company called checkbookira.com that was setting these things up. And a lot of companies do this. A lot of custodians give people checkbook. They set up an LLC for their IRA and they say, go and do what you want. And this particular company was telling people they could go buy silver and gold and take possession of it in their IRA, which is 100% banned in the code. And yet they were just saying, well, you could do it, just separate it in your safe. And that is not true. The code specifically says IRAs can't do it. Well, the IRS went after these people and they had $700,000 in their IRA and they lost. The IRS, the US tax court ruled on November 18th that they were violating the IRA. So they had the entire account distributed and penalized. So their tax bill was like $250,000. The judge didn't just say you can't have gold. The judge said you cannot have command of assets with an IRA, meaning you can't be in charge of them, holding them. You can direct them, but you can't be in charge. And so there's a difference between control and command. Control means you get to tell people where to put the assets. That's still fine. But if you actually want to have the ability to write checks, you cannot use an IRA to do that. It has to be through another vehicle. It has to be through an eQRP. And that I mean, this wasn't a pending legislative change. This is the court, which means it's law today. And in addition, Dave mentioned this, the Congress is still going after IRAs. Primarily, they're going after IRAs because they're trying to figure out how to feed their never-ending hungry beast called entitlement programs and bigger government. So they're going to go after the honeypots. There's $10 trillion in IRAs. That's where they're going. They're going straight for those because they know that they can pick those off. And a lot of people are they're investing in things outside of Wall Street. So between the Wall Street lobbyists and Congress, they're thinking, oh, it's great. Let's just pull all this money out. It'll go back to Wall Street, and then we can tax the people that are messing with the system. There is no longer the ability. If you are doing this, you are setting yourself up right now for an audit and for a distribution and a taxation event with penalties. We can fix it. And like I said, you can move the assets. You can actually move your LLC from the IRA straight into an eQRP, and that fixes the problem. Now you have checkbook control legally because the tax code is set up for you to have the ability to do that because you're the trustee. So it's better information. Once you have better information, you can make better choices and stop paying taxes. To have an eQRP, it's really open to almost anybody. Real estate agents, self-employed people, you have an online business. If you're a property manager, you can do it. If you've got rental property and you manage it. Passive investors, if you've got a W-2, you can do it. If you employ people, up to 50 employees, part-time, full-time. So who did I leave out? I mean, your dog. There's almost anybody can do this. It's wide open. Your kids, I'm going to show you some examples with kids, which is freaking amazing. Why people don't do this is, well, because they don't know, but there's really anybody that's out there. We have people as young as 2 years old. We have people as old as 85 that are setting plans up and using them and you'll see why, because the Roth component is probably the biggest way to save taxes for permanently that's in the code. Getting money into an eQRP is either from rollovers, IRAs, 401ks, thrift savings plans, as many as you want, as often as you want, or new contributions. Contributions now are 61 and 67,000 this year, 67.5, depending on if you're 50 or over. So you can put a lot of money in. Doesn't matter how much money you make. It can be deferred or Roth. So you could literally make $70,000 in income and put almost every dollar of that into a Roth account today. So that's called, many of you have heard of this. It's called the mega backdoor Roth. It's a way to get money in. You don't have to pay yourself $200,000. You could, but you could put all this money in. And that's the key, getting money into Roth. I mean, truly, it's not about deferring money now. It's about paying no taxes forever. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, but there's ways to get money in there. Only thing you can't really move over is a Roth IRA or an inherited IRA, and we have to do different things with those. In 2020, or actually December 31st, 2019, the Secure Act was passed. It was effective January 1st, 2020. This changed the rules, and it said if you even have a part-time employee, you cannot have an individual 401k. A lot of people had part-time employees, and they had these solo 401ks. That's not even an option anymore. The good news is with an eQRP, you can have up to 50 part-time, full-time employees. So it solves that problem. It also gives you audit protection. One of the things that people don't realize, not only audit protection, but lawsuit protection. A solo 401k is not protected by ERISA the way that big 401k plans are. eQRPs have the litigation protection. They have audit protection. So you have all these protections because the last thing you want to do is build up a multi-million-dollar retirement account and then somebody sues you and takes it because you hurt their feelings in California, which I think is probably one of the laws that you can break there. If you tell somebody that they're a girl, you probably get sued. So this is the safe harbor. It's a unique product that came out last year. And this is what allows us to help you if you've got part-time or full-time employees. And what it means is that if you've got up to 50 employees, everybody, including the owners, gets to control all their money and do all these different really cool things outside of Wall Street. You can still use Wall Street. It's still an option in the plan, but you can do all the cool stuff, all the real estate, the ATMs, the crypto, like all these different things, physical gold. Everything's included. Like you have control, you've got the support, you've got the TPA, and it saves the average business owner 30,000+ a year. So when people realize this, it's really funny. When we launched this and started offering it last year, when people found out about it, it was such an obvious yes. It was like, how quickly can we do this? Can we do this retroactively? And unfortunately, you can't do this retroactively. You can set up an eQRP for last year today. You can set up a plan for yourself if you don't have employees for the previous year up until the time you file your taxes. So if you're like, I just found out I made too much money in 2021, there's a way for us to reduce a big chunk of that. It may be an option to save $20,000, $25,000 in taxes by retroactively setting something up. And you can almost never do retroactive tax planning. At least I'm not aware of almost anything in the tax code. Very rarely, maybe net operating loss going backward, but this is one of the rare things that you can do going backwards. A few things that I'll share with you, and then we'll do some questions, Q&A. A retiring early option, some K-Roths, and some audit protection. This is one of the strategies that we like to use, where one spouse is a real estate professional, and we take some money in, like we'll take $300,000, for example, in a retirement account. One of the two spouses convert it to Roth. That would normally trigger a taxable event of $300,000 of new income. And once we do that, we can take that money out, no penalty. And now we've got this problem, this $300,000 in income. But if we go buy $1 million building and we get $300,000 of offsetting depreciation with cost seg, we can literally zap the tax. So big picture, what happened? We've got money in a retirement account. Somebody's 40, 45, 50 years old. We can get the money out, invested in real estate, no tax, no penalty. And now you've got income, and potentially this is a way to retire and not have to wait until you're 60. So very cool tool that is literally not being talked about by anybody else in the country that I'm aware of. K-Roths, we call these the minor deductions. Right now, it's almost 13,000 in 2022 that you can contribute to a child. And what this means is you can pay a child, pay them up to almost 13,000, no tax to them, because the first 12, 13,000 is tax free, 0% tax bracket. You get a tax deduction if you're paying your kids for work and they have active income. What does this mean? It means that they could take that money and contribute it to a Roth eQRP, and that thing grows tax-free. So that money literally became a tax deduction to you, and it's growing tax-free, and you get to control it while they're growing up. When they hit 18, a couple of options. One, you can say, okay, you're going to be in charge of this. Two, it can keep growing. Three, you could actually take all of the money and all the gains and use it for school. So some people have these 529 plans, and they say, okay, I'm saving money. That is the worst idea ever compared to this, because this plan allows you to use all of it, which is a lot more money contributing each year for really in investing self-directed. You get to control it, and then you can use it all for school, or it can just keep growing. A 529 doesn't have the same options. It's limited, it's less. And so when you think about this, it's like, wow, plus every chunk that you put in, you can take out at any point for any reason, for anything you want. So over, say, 20 years, you've got $250,000 in contributions. You could pull that out, and your kid's like, I don't want to go to school. All right, fine. So give the money to the kid. The kid gets to start a business or invest in real assets. That's another option. And then the gains that have been compounding just keep growing. And so now they've got a Roth account that's on its way to becoming a Peter Thiel Roth account. So this is the way, and by the way, that's me at 5 being a child model. So if you're like, how do I pay my 2-year-old? Well, child modeling is a thing. So, Gerber babies, or your babies, or your kids. So just another option. Talk to your tax professionals about that. But if you're not paying your kids, it's crazy to me, because kids are expensive. You might as well pay them and get a tax deduction and use this system. This is what I just talked about. We can always talk about that offline if you want to dig into it and figure out how you can use your kids as little tax deductions. And then the audit explosion. The IRS is getting set to get an $80 billion infusion. This is the request, talking about the funding with the legislation that's going through. This would bring on 87,000 incompetent new agents for revenue generation. And this is a problem. Some of you may have noticed that there are letters coming out from the IRS that make no sense. Like, you pay your taxes today and you get a letter tomorrow that was printed last week. It's like, wait, what happened? And it's saying you've done something wrong. They're sending out letters. We're seeing this across the board. It's just an automated, you're guilty, prove yourself innocent. So one of the things that you got to be really mindful of is, do you have the right team around your retirement plan? And do you have protections if you get audited, if your plan gets audited? eQRPs are the only plans in the country, retirement plans, that actually give you audit protection, up to $50,000 of audit protection. What that means is that if you end up if your plan gets audited and the IRS says, hey, we didn't like what you did 3 years ago, then we will have Provision, which is the firm that we really like, that we use, our accountants. We will have them defend that audit and pay up to $50,000 on your behalf. Only one of its kind. And quite frankly, it's a bigger risk now because of all this money that's going into AI and new agents that really aren't that smart. By the way, the average audit that we historically is $20,000, $25,000 out of pocket. And that's when you win. And typically, unless in rare occasions, they'll pay for it or they'll reimburse, but usually it's just out of pocket. Barato si caro is one of my favorite sayings. If any of you speak Portuguese or happen to be in Brazil right now, What it means, it's cheap objects can be expensive. And one of the cheapest objects out there is bad advice. It's stupid people. It's neighbors that want to give you advice. It's Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman telling you that the best way to get rich is to be out of debt. It's stuff like that. And we don't have time for it. I don't know if Einstein said this, but it seems something smart. So we use the meme. And it's the alternative to that is talking to smart people that have been there and have done it. I think that one of the things that I love about Dave is that he's creating real freedom out of real assets and sharing that with you guys. And when you have the best teams and you have people that are experts and they're actually trying to figure out how to make you free versus how to try to get money out of your pocket, it really starts to shift the energy of the relationship into a place of integrity and freedom. And that's what it's all about. So really important to not listen to dumb people. And one of the reasons you listen to people that have been around like Dave and I for a long time is they tend to have rules around what they do. Back when I lost my 25 million in 2008, my rule was more. And in 2010, I said, I need different rules because that didn't work out very well. So these three that I circled, one, I don't hang out with or do anything with people that aren't self-responsible. That includes our clients. If we have somebody coming in and they start talking victim, like that's their language, they are gone. We don't do it. I like Dave a lot. You guys probably do too, because he's real and he doesn't do victim. It's a self-responsible mentality and attitude towards everything. He owns it, and I respect that. And that's a rule I have. I will not get any, because if you get close to people that aren't self-responsible, they tend to rub off on you. It's like, that's the virus. It's not COVID. It's freaking victim mentality. That's the worst virus that's out there. I also am pretty particular after having doubled down on everything. And I had 7 projects in 2007 that were all supposed to make me over $1 million each. And by the end of 2008, they had lost me at least $1 million each. So I'm pretty mindful of making sure I don't put everything in one basket. That's a strategy that works when you have some more money. If you've got 50 grand, you're probably going into one basket, but just one of my things, because I know I'm going to be wrong here and there. And I don't invest in bulletproof vest areas. So I had an apartment in Memphis in 2006, 7, 8 one of the $1 million losses, actually like 3 million. And I should have asked Dave where to invest with the people he knew, because I was in the wrong neighborhood. I was next to Elvis's house. And apparently that's a dangerous area in Whitehaven. And so I got a call one day, and this is after 6 months before somebody had stolen all my copper. I got this call and they're like, hey, we got a problem. They stole the copper again and they killed your guard. And I was like, I am in the wrong neighborhood. I don't want the burden of somebody else's life on my shoulders anymore. So I have a really hard rule that I only invest in places that I feel safe in. Biggest concern most people have, many of you have it, is that you're going to run out of money before you run out of oxygen, before you run out of life. And this is millennials, boomers, and it's a big concern. So how do we get past that? It's about teams. It's about people. It's about relationships. This is my team. That's me in the back. And we were over teaching at an event in, actually Dave was on the other side of that wall somewhere. This was in Dallas this last fall. And this is what we do. We educate. And so education is one of the cool things that we can do. Education is one of the slowest things in the world. It evolves. It takes about 50 years to evolve education systems, unless you're on the outside of the institutions. So our job is to teach you, your friends, how to safely 10x your retirement money. That's really what we do. It's giving you ways to make sure that you can go to zero on tax and you're using it smart. There are smart ways to invest retirement money in real estate when you do shorter term projects, so that you're not getting killed with recaptures. You're not getting killed with UBIT. That's what we're here to do. Give you education, give you tools, give you ideas, and then you can share those, because who doesn't want to be a superhero? I mean, all of us want to help other people. It's inherent in us being humans and wanting relationship. So I'm going to help you do that. And the way I want to do that is, I want you guys to get a copy of this. It's a 15, 16 page report on what we just talked about. It'll be sent to your phone. Just text the 307-213-3475 with the word eQRP. You'll get the report. It'll also ask you if you want a copy of the book. I'll FedEx a copy of the book as soon as it comes out. And that way you have resources. Share the report, give it to your friends. I mean, really, there's nothing here that I wouldn't want shared, because why is there anything wrong with people that are unshackled? Like, that's the greatest gift of freedom ever. And we're going in the opposite direction. So anything I can do to help you guys with your freedom, that's important to me. The alternative to that is that you end up with regret in your life and you have really bad tattoos. So text or regret, but I highly recommend texting. And I'm I'm really happy that you guys hung out. I see a bunch of people joined, and you guys, I think everybody stayed, which is amazing. So happy to answer questions. I'm always available after this too, but Dave, it's all yours. I will stop sharing and whatever we can do here.
All right, thanks, Damion, and thanks to you guys. Yes, we do have a nice crowd here, and it's impressive for a midday event, so that's good. So again, my two biggest, and that was very good, that was very educational. I even learned some stuff, even though I've sat through many of your presentations at live events where we get to speak together at some of the same events. But the two biggest things, I guess what really spurred me into action was when, we mentioned it became very obvious that self-directed IRAs were in the limelight. They're now in the spotlight. Okay, we know they're looking at them. Okay, red flag. But the biggest one, even the bigger one beyond that, was the one about UBIT. As you can imagine, our self-storage facilities, we use about 65% leverage there. So we often get the question about, okay, how does UBIT work? The people that are somewhere aware that they will get hit with UBIT, but don't quite understand how it works. And then there's some people that are totally unaware. So I wanted to really shine a light on that and say, hey, this is real. And if you're not aware of it, you're going to get hit with it at some point in time if you have a self-directed IRA account and you invest in private placements or leverage real estate. So got a couple questions. Got one here. And feel free, guys, to drop some questions in the chat box. I'm going to have this is going to be open. I see we got a couple of them dropping in here. It says, what about self-directed IRA LLC? Is that exempt from UDFI or UBIT? You got a comment on that?
Yeah, that is not exempt. The only thing that's exempt is anything under the 401 section. The eQRP is exempt. All the IRAs are triggered by UDFI, UBIT. So it doesn't matter if it's traditional, self-directed, Roth, all of the IRAs. If you have an IRA and you're doing anything leveraged to these syndications or leveraged real estate, you're going to have that tax when you exit that thing. The tax is triggered when you have a net income over $1,000. So typically in the life journey of these assets, you've got offsets from depreciation. So you don't actually have a net $1,000 event. But when that thing sells, it's like the big self-storage event that happened this last fall. I think it was December. Is that right? When everything exited?
Late November. Yeah.
November. So that anybody that had IRAs that were investing, they have a ginormous tax bill because that was a very successful exit. So that was a great example of, oh, dang, I wish I had done something. And I know some of the people had switched.
Yep. Can you explain why that is? Is it like, why is eQRP exempt from that, but self-directed IRAs are not? What's is there like a loophole of some kind, or what like how do you do it?
It's called money. Lobbyists went to DC and had the rules exempted out for 401ks because years ago it became very clear that pensions and 401ks were putting billions and billions of dollars into commercial real estate as lenders and as equity investors. And when they're doing that, they're getting hit with UBIT because of UDFI. So the laws were changed. And if you look at the tax code, it specifically exempts leveraged real estate because of the amount of money that was being put in. It's just that these plans have better lobbyists than IRA companies. They didn't think to do that. I don't know why they haven't since, but probably because nobody in Congress is going to try to go change this. It was changed a long time ago.
Got it. Okay. April is asking, I have 0 employees and a solo 401k. Other than lawsuits, what are the reasons should I switch to an eQRP?
Well, there's a number of things. The lawsuits are a big deal. That the tax audit protection, the anonymity with eQRPs, they're anonymous. Solo 401ks are not anonymous. You don't have layers of protection there to actually maneuver. And not all solo 401ks are built the same. And literally keep in mind that you can never even have a part-time employee with a solo 401k. So that's a huge problem. One of the things that's important, sometimes people will say, well, I don't think I'm going to have any. If you said, okay, I actually want to grow. I want to have a part-time employee. You would then have to move your plan over into an IRA. And if you already invested in real estate with your solo 401k, you're literally setting yourself up for UBIT, forced yourself to. So there's no good reason to have a solo. I think the only reason people do is because they just kind of default do it. But there's not to mention that you have a world-class team, and that's a big difference. It's like your team and what you bring to the table, Dave. there's a lot of options for everything out there. Everything is available. But the question is, who are the people on your team? And the team is what makes all the difference in the world.
April is asking again, I do private lending, so I'm not subject to UBIT, correct?
On sometimes it depends on what happens with UBIT because of UDFI. If you have an investment that benefits from leverage, so for example, it could be argued that if you provided a second a mortgage, so a junior mortgage you were providing and it was a high yield, 20% type of note, you're benefiting from a first mortgage, and so that could be an event where you actually do trigger it as a private lender. So that's not going to matter if it's in a 401k. If you're doing it from a solo 401k or an eQRP, it wouldn't matter. It's only in the IRAs that you're going to be hit with that stuff.
So if you take a second lien position, you could be in the crosshairs.
Yeah, because the whole point of UDFI is benefiting from leverage, and there's leverage that you're benefiting. If you're in a second position, you're benefiting from the first mortgage.
Sure. Okay. Sachin is asking, what's the difference between a solo 401k and an eQRP?
That was slides 52 through 61. No, just kidding. I don't know if you saw the whole thing, but I mean, big differences are you have flexibility to be able to invest in all these things. A lot of solo 401ks just give you the ability to put money in. They're advertised so that you can put $50,000, $60,000 in, and then you can go to Schwab or Fidelity and get a solo 401k. They're free, and they say you can invest in whatever you want as long as it ends in ETF or some stock sticker or ticker symbol. So it depends on what you have. eQRPs actually give you the ability to invest however you want. It gives you control. You actually do have a checkbook. You've got these protections in place, both audit and lawsuit. You've got anonymity. You've got the ability to have part-time, full-time employees. You've got the eQRP team. What we're seeing is there's a lot of like one-man bands that are running around that are setting up shops, setting up solo 401ks and trying to tap into this market. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of people are getting stuck. We have people come in and they'll say, I set this thing up and then I can't find my person. Like I set it up 6 months ago and they just are gone because it's a complex environment. And so they're not all built the same. And you'll see that when you see how we build it.
All right, here's another one. After a real estate sale with a 401k solo is made, is it still possible to fix the UBIT tax?
So the only time you're going to have the UBIT for the real estate is if you have an IRA, and after it's sold, it's too late. You could do it the day before. So, but if you had a property that was sold, like the Reliant deal that closed, if somebody came in now and said we got this, it wouldn't even have mattered if it was the day after. It was too late.
Rich asks, where he makes a statement. So it sounds like if you have an LLC held by an IRA, you should either dissolve that LLC as ASAP and just use the custodian to transfer the funds going forward, or transfer the LLC to an eQRP. Any comments?
Yeah, the only thing that you should be thinking about doing immediately is transferring the LLC to an eQRP. And I say that because that's the only thing that's not going to trigger a taxable event. If you dissolve the LLC, if you dissolve the IRA, you've got taxes, potentially penalties. So the cleanest thing that gives you time and space is to immediately move it over, because right now anybody that has one is disqualified. And so, hoping that you're not going to get tagged by the IRS when they're using AI and going after people and cross-referencing big data is not a good strategy.
By the way, to your point, you mentioned that a couple of times. You mentioned in a slide about 87,000 new IRS agents coming on board. These people are not the brightest in the bunch. I just recently, I got an audit, and it's going to be very simple. It's going to be very simple because I have a great team. We work with the same tax strategist. Tim Gertz is our provision is our team, and so I get this audit, and it's showing like this big, huge loss last year from an ATM investment that I made. So you get this audit like, hey, what's this? What is that? And so Tim did a little research on this IRS agent, and turns out she was a cashier like 8 or 10 months ago, and she had no idea what bonus depreciation was. So Tim now has the pleasure of educating this, former cashier about how the tax law works, and that's who's out there on the street auditing small business and investors like us. So we're in for a real treat. Make sure you got a great team. All right, Ludwig. in an eQRP, do you need to adhere to the fairness test for 401ks? If so, is there a strategy technique to pay yourself more and max out of your and your spouse's matches?
There, yeah. So specifically, we're talking about how you structure it so that with safe harbor plans and contributing to employees. So we'll build it and we'll strategically build it so that you can max yours out and have the least amount that you have to pay. Whether you want to pay more or not is totally up to you with matching and everything. But we'll structure it, and this is a case by case. It is not a one size fits all. That's why we're the only ones in the country that do it, because it's incredibly complex. So we absolutely do structure these things to benefit the owners as much as we can, and that oftentimes is a lot better than what people think it's going to be. So it's worth looking at.
Paul is asking, how about people with more than 50 employees?
Congratulations. That's If you have more than 50 employees, this generally is not going to be the solution for you unless those employees are split amongst companies that you don't have a controlling interest in. Controlling interest is 80% or more, and depending on if you're the president of 5 different companies, those are generally going to be blobbed together. But if you have multiple companies and they have different employees, this is not meant for 500 person company or something. That's because everybody's going to have the ability to self-direct, and so we built this niche for a part of the population. It's way too complex for 500 or 1,000 or 50,000. It simply wouldn't work.
Lynn asks, can any custodian set up an eQRP or only through Damion? You got this thing locked down or patented, or
it is. This is our intellectual property. It's our trademark, and it's unique intellectual property. So if you ever see it anywhere other than the eQRP company, there's probably a pending lawsuit going on because people like to steal what works. And we're the only ones that can do it because, well, quite frankly, I created it.
Nice. So. All right. Oh, okay. Gio is back again. He says, I was invested in Mallard Creek our apartment complex, and Key West self-storage with my 401k.
You should be fine.
Well, congratulations, because those were 2 great deals, but I understand the face behind the comment, because if you were invested with your 401k, you had a lot of gains and you had to pay tax.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious if it was an IRA, there would have been UBIT, but if it was a 401k, probably going to be fine. So may not actually be a problem, but sometimes people up the 2. So no frowny faces yet. Maybe just call me and we can talk about it. You may actually be able to celebrate later.
Yep. Good. I have a 401k today, been with a corporation for 10 years. What is the process to transfer a QRP?
So if you're still working, it's almost impossible. It's legally allowed with an in-service rollover, but typically, for one, it's only going to be profit sharing and matching that's going to be allowed to be moved over. And typically it's only when you're 59 and a half, unless you leave the job. So if you're still at a job, you can check. There are certain ones that will allow you to move over some of their stuff, but it's probably 1 in 50. I mean, candidly, it's probably not going to happen until you leave. So just consider that when you're putting money in. It's probably in jail for a while. Got it.
Hamp is asking, what section of the tax code recognizes the difference between a solo 401k and an eQRP?
So all the 401k products are under the section 401. So there's 401k, there's 401h, there's A. So there's pieces that we use to build everything together. It's all inside the same part of the code.
Okay. Chris is asking, if you don't have your own business and you only have a W-2 job, can you invest in eQRP? How do you get these high contribution limits in this situation?
So in order to have any type of 401k, eQRP, or solo, you've got to have some type of business, and you can also be a W-2. So a business, there's a million different things. You could literally have a lemonade stand. You could have an eBay store. You could be an online affiliate. I mean, I hear people that for some reason somebody told them, oh, you have to be a business owner. And I think that's people that are trying to sell IRAs, quite frankly. The reality is that as long as you've got a business that has the potential for making money, you can have one of these type of retirement accounts. So you've got flexibility, and then making contributions into it has to come from some type of self-employment income or something from that business. It can't be wages from your W-2 that would be contributed. There's some ways that you can recharacterize income. So if you had passive income, you can recharacterize it. Not the best plan to recharacterize a bunch of passive to active, because you're going to trigger self-employment tax, but it could give you seed capital. So if you recharacterize $20,000, paid 15% with self-employment tax, Now you've got 20,000 that could potentially be your seed capital for a Roth account. I mean, when I started, I had $6,000 I borrowed from Chase. Yes, it was Chase, but I borrowed it from freaking Chase Bank on a Visa card. I turned that 6,000 into 20 million. And I mean, so people say, well, how much do I need? Like, I don't have that much. I'm like, well, do you have some hustle? Because if you've got some hustle, you could take $20,000 and turn it into millions.
Yeah. You had your contact information on the last slide, but Paul's asking to see it again. Do you want to just verbalize it right now? So everybody's got to jot it down.
Yeah, it's eqrp.co, and my email is Damion@eqrp.co. I'm going to put it in the chat so you guys can see. All right, I think this is just
got it.
But yeah, Damion@eqrp.
All right. Sachin is asking, do I need to have an S or a C corp set up for the eQRP? What else is the criteria to set up an eQRP?
So you have to, so anything, any type of entity, it could be a corp, LLC, it could be you personally, because you personally are a business. Like if you say, I'm going to go consult, I'm going to help somebody with something and charge them, you're a sole proprietor. That is one of the allowed entities. So you may think, oh, well, I didn't really do anything. Well, you are. I mean, you're in business for yourself. And so it doesn't require any type of formal filing with anything. You can literally just be a sole proprietor. And then what else? The criteria is that you've got some type of business that can create income. People have said, well, I haven't made any money. And I'm like, well, look, I've started 60 plus companies over the last 25 years. And many of those never made any money, but they were all businesses because they all had the possibility and potential, and there was an intent. So when the IRS looks at these things, they look at intent. What you can't do is go set up an LLC with no intent to make income. And because it won't pass the smell test. Even the cashier agent will say, this doesn't even make any sense. So you got to have some type of intent.
Yep. Does eQRP allow you to invest in real estate abroad? What are the general guidelines for doing so? Any specific rules?
You can, it's the same as if you're investing in the US. One of the great things is you've got a checkbook. You can wire directly. You can do whatever you want. So if you want to buy land, you want to buy, a coffee farm in the middle of Panama or rainforest in Costa Rica or whatever you have in mind, you just write the check. It's very, very straightforward. You don't have to have a custodian with paperwork going through a custodian. It's a lot simpler than people have run into a lot of problems using IRAs because the custodian is trying to figure out the local laws and everything else, and it can just get really gummed up, and then everything has to be processed through them. This is very straightforward, very simple.
So there's a couple how-to questions in here. I'm just going to encourage you guys, Paul, and there was a couple more that said, how do I move my funds over to eQRP? I'm going to encourage you guys just to reach out to Damion directly for that. Let me see here. Can I have my 401k from my W-2 job and start an eQRP on the side from a real estate investment?
Yeah, you can definitely have multiples. There's no limit on how many you can have, how big you can have, how many rollovers you can do. This is really flexible. And it's, like I said in one of the slides, it's not about whether you can or can't have this. It's about whether you shouldn't. Like there are people that literally, like me at 25, when I bought my Ferrari, probably shouldn't have had an eQRP because I was reckless. I mean, it took me a week to get arrested on Christmas Eve. So there are certain people that should not have access to their money. They need an advisor to protect them from themselves. So, yeah. I mean, I say that, but it's actually true.
Thomas is asking, I would like to use an eQRP and I've been wanting to create an entity to pay my kids. Can either of you recommend someone to advise on entity creation to hold my private equity investments? I can do that, Thomas. Send me a quick email at dave@therealassetinvestor.com, and I'll connect you with the right people. Steve Kent, if you have an eQRP, we do, and then stop working and retire, can you still have the eQRP since we may wind down or sell the qualifying business?
Yeah, what we're going to do so you can have an eQRP for your business that you have, say employees, or you've grown it, and then you wind down or you sell it off, you can do a rollover. And so you roll it over and then you'd have your own plan, or it could be for another business. We can roll these things into different businesses. One of the things that we do is it's dynamic. And that's one of the things people ask, well, what's the difference? This is dynamic. It evolves, it shifts. We're not going to tell you no. We're going to figure out how to shift things. So that it's a better experience than going, oh man, I did this one thing and I'm stuck. So whatever you're doing, if you're transferring, if you're selling, we're going to be able to migrate, no problem.
Chris is asking, is a eQRP a trust? Who owns the eQRP? If it's a trust, Is there a custodian? Oh, let me go. Is there a custodian? My understanding is retirement plans have to go through a custodian.
So IRAs have to have a custodian. And that's one of the things the courts ruled in November, that you have to have a custodian that is basically an overseer. If you read the court case, you can go to eqrp.co/McNalty, MCNALTY, and you can read the case. And then there's commentary that I have from the top, and then the whole case is there, the judge's opinion. And so a custodian has to be involved. And one of the things that really irritated the judge in the tax court was he said, people with these checkbook IRAs they don't have a custodian involved. They're doing whatever they want. And so he said no. And that's the big problem. So you do have to have a custodian involved there. A 401k, an eQRP, has the ability to choose who the trustee is. The trustee is the overseer. That can be you. You have a fiduciary responsibility. It's to yourself. So just keep that in mind. It's a very different thing. Most people think everything is the same, and these are different parts of the tax code.
Okay. One more question, then we're going to wrap it up. Lynn is asking, what are the setup and maintenance costs for setting up an eQRP? Do you want to just talk about, kind of give the high level overview? I'm sure it varies between different scenarios, but just kind of talk to us about the costs.
Yeah, so the costs range depending on whether it's a small business or whether you have employees. So it ranges from $4,000 to $9,000, and that builds everything. It builds the retirement plans, it builds the LLCs, it builds the bank accounts, it does all the rollovers. So part of what you're paying for is white glove service. You're not getting what most companies in general will do, whether it's IRAs or 401k companies, is they hand you a binder and they say good luck, and you're like, okay. So they basically photocopied a binder. We're going to build everything and set it up and get your money moved over and then walk you through and be a part of your investments. Meaning when you call us and say, I don't know how to fill out a PPM, we're going to go through the PPM with you. And it's like that. There's all this that happens because of that. So what I will tell you is that we are the premium provider in the country for retirement accounts, for self-directed retirement accounts. They're like, you could go to Schwab, for example, and get a free solo 401k and you get what you pay for. So they range annually. It's a fixed cost. It typically is from $700 to $900, and that includes the audit protection, the $50,000. It includes all the filings, 5500s, 1099s. Everything is included. And so there's no, like, we even cover wires. When you do wires, we pay for them. We literally, it's out of pocket. We pay for them. So when I say this is turnkey and you get everything, it's truly everything. And the only surprises you're going to have are the ones that make you happy. And then if you've got employees, the annual costs are going to probably end up being between $5,000 and $9,000, and that's about $30,000 less than you would have if you had a 401k with a typical mutual fund.
I'm going to do one more. There's one more question that came in on the chat. I have a big tax bill for 2021 because of profits from my online business. What can I do now to reduce the bill with an eQRP?
So you can set up a retirement account, an eQRP, retroactively. A lot of people will set up IRAs, but honestly, what the hell is the point? Like, you're gonna deduct $6,000. It doesn't matter. So with an eQRP, we can set it up before you file your taxes. We can set it up for the previous year. That law just changed a couple of years ago. We weren't able to do this until now. So we could, potentially 60, 100, 200,000, depending on if they're spouses or kids. So we can actually do quite a bit retroactively with this.
Great. Guys, thanks for joining us. Damion, thanks for everything. That was very educational. I'm sure I'll be pointing people to this recording in the future because we do get quite a few questions on this kind of thing. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on and sharing with the group. And I appreciate everything. Thanks
so much for having me. Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.